Welcome everybody to chesslecture.com. This is your host, International Master John Paul Wallace. In today's epic battle, we're looking at some old rivals, Karpov, Timman. They've played each other many times, including in the World Championship match, or candidates matches, I should say. This particular game was taken from 1988. Karpov had white and played a queen sacrifice, which is a sort of sacrifice that I've always wanted to play, but I don't think I've ever had a chance to play, normally because black tends to avoid it. But in this game, Timman actually allowed Karpov to implement the sacrifice, possibly hoping to outplay Karpov in the complications, because Karpov is known as a player that likes to keep things simple where he can. But of course that stereotype is a very dangerous one, because Karpov, like all world champions, can play every aspect of the game very well. So he started out with d4. Timman responded with d5. c4, the Queen's Gambit, and Timman plays the accepted, and Karpov played e4, which at the time was becoming a new trend. The classical move was knight f3 followed by e3, bishop takes c4, and that's still one of the main lines. These days they're both main lines, probably with roughly equal frequency. After e4, the modern main line these days I'd say would be e5. e4, e5, then white doesn't take on e5, he plays knight f3, e takes d4, bishop takes c4. But there are other moves, such as knight c6 in this position, or knight f6. Timman went for knight f6. Now it's correct for white to play e5. If knight c3 in this position and e5 in this, e5 is now good for black. So e5 is the correct response. Knight d5, bishop takes c4. Karpov has played this system a few times with pretty good results. It's a difficult position to assess. It's sort of like the Alekhines that occurs after 1 e4, knight f6, e5, knight d5. Here the c and d pawns are being exchanged. At first you think it's nice for black, because he has an outpost on d5. I used to like those sort of positions, especially when I was a kid, because you just feel like you've got that big square in the middle. But maturing over the years, I've come to see the benefits of the white setup, which is mostly an advantage in space. I think I've mentioned in a previous lecture too that a pawn on e5 can lend itself to a kingside attack, which is why in this game and in most games in this variation, black will try and castle queenside to at least avoid that. But as you can imagine, if you then go and castle queenside, then white's open c-file will also be of benefit. So knight b6 was played, which hits the bishop straight away. Now white can choose between bishop b3 or bishop d3, and I think Karpov has played both of them. He went for bishop d3 in this game because of course queen takes d4, bishop b5 check wins the queen. Knight c6, and knight e2 was played. An alternative is bishop e3, and now Timman played bishop g4. Now this is an interesting situation, because the bishop coming to g4 has forced white to make a decision. He can play f3, which keeps his knight on the board, which is also defending the d pawn. But f3 can be one of those sort of weakening moves that you might later regret. Karpov preferred to keep his pawn structure pure for the moment, and he played bishop e3. And now Timman had to be consistent and capture an e2. There's no point waiting for Karpov to play knight bc3, because then if bishop takes e2, Karpov will recapture with the knight and overprotect d4. So bishop takes e2. Bishop takes e2. Otherwise it'd be a free pawn on d4. Queen d7. This is the most aggressive way to continue. e6 was also possible, and possibly even castling kingside now that you've exchanged off the knight on e2, which could help for a kingside attack. But Timman wants to play in the most aggressive way possible, so he's going to castle queenside. Knight c3, castles queenside, a4. This is the start of aggressive play by Anatoly Karpov. He's sacrificing a pawn in order to gain an attack. For example, after knight takes d4, he of course plays a5. Now knight to a8 looks disastrous, so knight takes e2, a takes b6. This is interesting. If queen takes d1 now, you can take with the knight. Knight takes c3, queen c2, c takes b6. If a takes b6, of course rook a8 is mate. Queen takes c3 check. King b8. e6, very nice move. Now if f takes e6, it's bishop f4 check, king a8, rook takes a7 check, king takes a7, queen a3 with mate. Then queen takes e6 is forced. Castles. You can't play bishop f4 check because of the pin. This is a winning attack. And that's a long and very nice variation given by Anatoly Karpov. Timman, well capable of calculating that, played sensibly with a6 to prevent the onward march of that pawn from a5 and on to a6. a5, knight d5. And now Karpov continued playing aggressively. He doesn't play any half-hearted moves, for example castling, but he keeps the pressure on with bishop f3. Now e6 would be a blunder because of knight d5, e d5, bishop g4, f5, en passant, winning the queen. But after bishop f3, knight db4, and Timman is aiming to capture this pawn on d4. Now Karpov has a choice. He can castle and sacrifice his d-pawn for reasonable compensation. But he comes up with another brilliant idea. He plays e6. Now f takes e6 looks horrible for black. White has ideas like knight e4 and knight a4 and into c5. Not to mention the fact that as soon as you play something like fe6, it's going to be very difficult to get that bishop on f8 out. So queen e6 was played. But now Karpov plays d5, queen to e5 and castles. And in doing so, Karpov has set up a queen sacrifice which Timman can hardly avoid. You really don't want to have to move that knight on c6 because there's no good squares. So Timman had to go along with the show with e6. Karpov does his queen sacrifice dc6, rook takes d1, cb7 check, king b8, rook f takes d1. And now the position has to be assessed. It's black to move, very important, or we'd have mate in 1 on the board. White has two powerful bishops, although one of them can be exchanged if black plays bishop c5. Materially, it's 6 pawns each. So then white has rook and the bishop for a queen, which just on adding up points is 1 point less than the queen, 8 points versus 9. But there's the other factor to take into account, well, 2 factors indeed. First, the pawn on b7 being a very annoying sort of thorn in black's side, and potentially under certain circumstances, a potential queen there.